water, such an important element of our lives. Every living organism on the face of the earth relies on it, from the smallest microorganism to the largest mammal. Up to 60% of us human beings, our body, is water. That's why I would say it is the most precious natural resource that we can have. Now, unfortunately, during the last short clip that we just watched, 2 minutes clip, the equivalent of 6 children died. Today, 4,000 children will die because of the lack of water or because of waterborne diseases. Now, it's not nice to talk about this reality, and yet it is a reality. Now, for you and me, we haven't really experienced that reality. We go to our houses, we open our taps, here we go, we get water. If we don't have water there, it's maybe because the water pipes down the road are being fixed. And in a few hours, we're going to have it again. If we don't have it, well, then we're just going to go to a shop and make sure that we can buy it. We have no idea what it is not to have clean water, or what it is, or the side effects of waterborne diseases on a regular basis. We've never experienced that. Now, in 2015, all countries got together to evaluate to what extent the 8 Millennium Development Goals had been achieved. Now, some countries not just achieved, but exceeded. Unfortunately, many countries didn't make a lot of progress. That's when the governments and the United Nations understood that the Millennium Development Goals were not really very successful. So they said, we cannot go with that strategy. We've got to change our strategy. So the entire civil society got together, NGOs like EDRA, churches like the SDA Church, all the different organizations, UN system, governments got together and agreed on what we call now the Sustainable Development Goals. Don't worry, I'm not going to talk about the 17 goals today, but I do want to emphasize on goal 6, which is to ensure that access to water and sanitation is available to all by 2030. Now, is it possible to achieve that goal? Yes, it is possible if the whole society embraces it, if you and me embrace it. Now, as a midterm goal to goal 6, the idea is to ensure access to safe and sanitation for all within 30 minutes walking. That's a midterm solution. Now, you might think, well, that's still not good enough. Yes, I would agree with you. However, for a number of people, that would already be a great step forward. Now, let me take you to some of those people. How many of you have been to the beautiful country of Vanuatu? How many of you? Amazing country, isn't it? And by the way, we do have an EDRA Connections trip that goes there every year. If you haven't been there, you would love it. Amazing people, amazing place. Let me take you to, in particular, to the island of Embrem, an active volcano. In the red dotted area that you can see there, you will find the community of Bethel, where 50 families live. Now, once we found out how difficult it is for the 50 families to actually access water, we said there is no way that we can allow that to continue to happen. So our EDRA team got together with the community, and we pretty much went through a brainstorming process and developed a plan to actually minimize the problems of excess of water there. Now, as you can see, this is Ruth Jo. She's 37 years old. She's the mother of 3 kids. Now, up until recently, Ruth Jo has actually walked 14 kilometers a day to actually get her water. Not just Ruth Jo, but her kids and pretty much the entire community. Now, do you know what 14 kilometers is? That's actually walking from here to the airport and then back, okay, on a daily basis. And that would probably take 3 to 4 hours. Now, can you imagine yourself doing that? Can you imagine yourself walking the 7 Ks and then actually carrying water on your backs? Do you know how heavy that is? Now, this is what Ruth Jo has actually done for almost her entire life. Now, again, when we heard about that, we said there is no way that that continued to happen. So we put together this initiative, and we said, all right, we're going to try to come up with a bit of funding, a bit of the materials, but the whole community needs to come together. This is going to be your project. So from the moment that the materials were actually landed on the shore, everybody was working together. Everybody was helping, carrying the pipes so many kilometers away. Everybody was carrying the sandbags on their backs. So the first stage of the project was actually to construct the water collection and filter right at the source, because we wanted to ensure that the source was protected and it would last for a very long time. So again, the community got together and built that. Now, ladies also would help, everybody would help, even if they didn't know all the skills. They were guided by EDRA technicians, but they were all there. Now, again, their contribution involved digging the trenches, laying the pipes, installing the fittings, everything. It was their project, therefore they wanted to be involved. Now, there was no cement mixer. Do you know what it is to actually plaster a whole water tank with no cement mixers? So, some of you might have experienced that. But again, when you have the power of the community, when you have all the hands together, that is possible, and that's what they did. So that gives you a bit of an idea of one of the water tanks that were actually installed in the community. And the final product is a tap stand with a shower for 2 or 3 houses. Now you might say, well, no, that's not good enough. Well, that's excellent. No, that's wonderful. That is, the water is right there next to their footsteps. We also put a water tank next to the schools so the kids could also practice good hygiene. Now, what sort of impact did we have with this project? Well, when you think about it, the kids were spending about 3 to 4 hours a day, every day, okay, collecting water. So their study hours at school was actually quite limited. Their parents didn't have enough time to grow all the vegetables that they wanted. Now they had water and they could grow the vegetables. Kids could also participate in that, so they could take the goods to the market, and the whole community was happier. Believe me or not, one of the things that they also reported is that the incidence of domestic violence was decreased because everybody was happy. The impact of having clean water. Now, unfortunately, that's not the situation for about still 800 million people. They don't have access to an improved water source. What's 800 million people? That's pretty much 1 in every 9, okay? 1 in every 9 of us here, imagine, without having a proper access to water. That is a harsh reality. This is not right. This is not right. Now, I'm sure all of you have heard of the Declaration of Human Rights, right? Declaration 25 reads as follows. Everyone has the right to a standard of living adequate for the health and well-being of himself and of his family, including food, water, clothing, housing, and medical care, and necessary social services. Now, nearly 800 million people don't have access to water. Their rights are not being met. Now, let me take you to another country where waterborne diseases and the lack of water has actually greatly affected the place. The reason why I selected this country is because many of you have been there. In fact, many of you have met the person that I'm going to talk about. Now, Cambodia is a fascinating country, but in the late 70s, early 80s, something really catastrophic happened there. A major genocide, where pretty much 2 million people were tortured, were killed. All the systems, government, everything just failed, collapsed. Now, as a result, poverty just grew exponentially. When the ADRA team arrived in Bakan district, it soon realized that much needed to be done. One of the first people the team met was Mao, and some of you met Mao. Mao is now 43 years old, and she has been a mother of 15 children. Unfortunately, 8 of her children died of what she calls stomach sickness. Very simple diarrhea. And they all died within 3 months of their lives. Now imagine how Mao must have felt. Now losing one is already horrendous. Imagine losing 8 kids because of something so simple as waterborne diseases. Now this is a bit of an idea of Mao's home. Now you can see on the left-hand side the place where she buried her 8 kids. On the right-hand side of her house, it is the lake, pretty much a dirty pond, and the only source of water that she could access. Mao and her family shared one latrine with 10 other families up until recently. Now the rice paddy, yes, that was of course the place where they would grow rice, but that's pretty much where they would do also their business. There. Now once the team arrived and assessed, okay, what can we do here? What is the right solution for this community? Cambodia, oftentimes, they have problems with arsenic, so it's not just a matter of, getting a well going. We've got to test the water. We've got to make sure that people are safe. So the team, together with the community, they identified that water jugs was the best solution for that place. So together, they built a number of those. Now, the water jugs would be refilled during the, obviously, rainy season, but because they had so many of them, they would be okay during the dry season. So again, working with the community according to the context that they had. Now, you see this beautiful latrine, and that was actually done by you guys in one of the PAPS on a mission, ADRA Connections trip that you've been involved. So thanks to you, a number of them now have latrines. Now Mao was also involved in a savings and loan group where she learned how to save and how to start a small little business, and now she runs a little canteen where she makes a bit of money. And that's Mao saying to you, Ao Kun, thank you very much for you. Thank you very much, Pepster and ADRA, for what you have done. Now, sometimes nature goes a little bit wild and doesn't just affect a few communities, but affects whole countries, whole regions. Now, some of us were already alive in the 1980s. You would remember a major famine that affected Ethiopia, Sudan, that affected Chad, and a number of other countries. It was the worst natural disaster that most of these countries experienced for more than 100 years. Now, ADRA implemented 1983, 1984, a food distribution project in Sudan. And the government was so happy with what we actually did that they said, you know, there is a major famine really in the northern part of the country. We need a water project. We need you guys to actually go and work there. So ADRA got in touch with its different partners, different aid agencies, and was able to put together a very sizable project, water project for northern Sudan. Now, my brother back in Brazil, he was not doing very well. He was a pretty young adult. He was hanging out with the wrong crowd. He was just not making the right decision, shall we say, and really needed a break. He wanted to try a different environment, try something different. So he applied for a volunteer work arrangement with ADRA in Sudan and was accepted. So he was sent to be part of this water team, and I apologize, some of the photos are not super great. These are photos of photos, but these are real photos. And so he was there to work with the local team. They had drilling rigs, so they would spend hours trying to get to the water level. Now, doing that in the desert is not always easy, but they tried all sorts of things. If it didn't work here, they would go to a different place in the community until they would find it. So for him, it was an amazing experience. He lived with the locals, ate with the locals, earned next to nothing of a stipend, but was there serving and learning and working with the people. Now, once the well was drilled, they would put the drilling rig at the back of the truck, and off they went to the next community because they had hundreds of communities to serve. So that was the team made up of engineers, made up of technicians. You cannot see the community, but they were also involved in the construction of it. Now, whenever they were able to actually get water, there was a major celebration because it was so hard to do it. And sometimes they had to make 3, 4, 5 attempts before they would actually get any water. And that is pretty much the final product. A simple little pump that would actually provide water for the community for the entire needs. Now, one of the major challenges, I don't know if you have worked or have been to a deserty area, one of the major challenges is that they have sandstorms on a regular basis. Now, you and I have rain here, right? Last night and this week, a lot of rain, sometimes a bit of snow. There, they have sandstorms, which impacted their work on a regular basis. So many times they had to pack, the drilling rig or cover it, move from place to place. And that was actually quite disturbing. But again, you learn how to handle the challenges of the desert. Now, in so working with the communities, my brother's life was really changing. He was, really understanding, okay, the many opportunities that he had in his life. Many things that, he was exposed to, and there people had pretty much nothing. Now, this particular photo is really important. On this day, 3 of them, they needed to actually reach another community 12 hours away. And they had to sort of cross the desert, the Saharan desert. Now, as usual, they would take 3 spare tires. They would take a little bit of water with them. And that's how they would, go. So they started the trip. After 3 hours, boom, 1 flat tire. After 2 more hours, 1 flat tire, another flat tire. Went along a little more, boom, another flat tire. 3 had already been flat. They kept on going, boom, another flat tire. Right in the middle of the desert, they could not move. So, what to do now? Now, in those days, the 80s, there was no cell phone. They had a radio, but the radio wasn't strong enough to actually reach headquarters in the capital. So what to do? What would you do? They had just a gallon of water and a few biscuits. What do you do if you are in a situation like that? Well, they decided to take a short walk, to see if there was anything around. So they did that on day one. They took a little walk, went a bit of a direction, walked back. They couldn't find anything. On the second day, they said, no, we've got to, try, because if we just stand here, what's going to happen? So they, again, took another walk to a different direction, walked back. After a few hours, they had found nothing. Now, they were getting pretty desperate because the little container of water that they had pretty much finished. They said, well, this is now our third day. Shall we still go for a bit of a walk and see what we can find? Yes, they did. So they walked in one direction, a different direction, and after 2 hours or so, they found a little bush area. And they said, well, if there is a bit of bush here, there should be a bit of water. So they checked the sand, and it was a little bit wet, and they dug a little bit, and they tried to get a bit of water, but it was just sort of water with sand. They said, we have no alternative. Let's just chew it. Let's just suck it and see what we can get. And that was actually the only thing they could find. So they said, well, there is no point in going back. We have no water left. We have no food left. If we die, we're going to die here. That was day 3. So they stayed there day 4. I don't know the details how they survived at night, because as you know, in the desert, the temperatures drop at night, and they could easily die of cold. But anyway, they stayed there. That was day 4. Day 5. Day 6. Chewing that water, hardly being able to do anything, just laying down there. Day 7. A tribe of nomads found them. They were all there, laying. They couldn't do anything. They put them on the back of their camels, took them to their camp a few kilometers away. They fed them. They gave them a drink. After some time, they took them to the authorities, and from there they were able to, sort of go their own way and get the pickup and so forth. Now, my brother was there to help the people to actually have access to clean water. And he almost died because of the lack of water. But that was such an amazing experience for him. If I can have the next slide, please. That's when he came back after being away for 2 years. When he came back, he was a different guy. I was only 13 years old. And when I heard his stories, when I heard what had happened to him, I was really touched. And from that day onwards, I made a commitment. That's it. I'm going to serve in whatever way you want me to serve. And if it is with ADRA, then I'll do so. And it has been with ADRA. Some of our friends say that if you get the ADRA bug, it's very hard to get rid of it. Anyway, I've had the ADRA bug, but it has been a blessing. Now, today, he is a medical doctor. He serves 100 patients a day on a particular island in Brazil. His whole life was changed for this experience that he had. Now, sometimes it's not just the people that we serve in the communities that are changed. We are always changed as well. I don't know if you have come across this particular quote. Thousands have lived without love. No one without water. Sounds so simple, isn't it? But sometimes we just don't think about the basic necessities that many of us around us or in our communities have. Without the basic necessities being met, there is no chance of life that Jesus is always wanted us to have, life to the fullest. Now I'm going to take you to the last story for the day. And this story is about Jesus. Now Jesus is part divine, part human. He was also many times pretty thirsty. So let me take you to this beautiful story found in John 4. There are different accounts of Jesus being thirsty in the Bible, but let's focus on the one found in John 4. Now, Jesus and his disciples had just walked the whole morning on the way to Galilee through Samaria. They stopped in this town of Sychar near Jacob's well. Jacob of the Bible. So as they stopped there, Jesus was super thirsty and he decided to sit by the well while his disciples went actually to get a bit of food. So as he was sitting there by the well, a Samaritan woman came to him and he asked her, "Would you mind if I have a bit of water?" Now the Samaritan woman said to him, "You are a Jew. I'm a Samaritan. How can you ask for that? You know that that cannot happen." Now we know that according to the rabbinical traditions, Jews and Samaritans wouldn't talk. In fact, the only time that it was acceptable for them to actually have any sort of interaction was in an instance of trade. So here it is, this woman reminding Jesus that, hey, we cannot really talk. And again, you're a man, I'm a woman. You're a Jew, I'm a Samaritan. It just doesn't work. And then Jesus answered her, verse 10. "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks for a drink, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water." Now Jesus already pointing out to something more than just physical water. "Sir," the woman said, "you have nothing to draw with and the well is deep. Where can you get this living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, as did also his sons and his flocks and herds?" Again, she was just thinking about the physical water. She was thinking, hey, you've got no rope, you've got no bucket. How are you going to get your water? Jesus answered, "Everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again. But whoever drinks the water I give him will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give him will become in him a spring of water welling up to eternal life." Now the woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water so that I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming here to draw water." Again, she was still just thinking about physical water. And then Jesus kind of changed the subject a little bit. He told her, "Go, call your husband and come back." "I have no husband," she replied. Jesus said to her, "You're right. You're right when you say that you have no husband. The fact is you have had 5 husbands, and the man you now have is not your husband. What you have just said is quite true." "Sir," the woman said, "I can see that you are a prophet." Now, she understood that Jesus was talking about her secrets. And she said, "Oh, you've got to be at least a prophet. Nobody can really sort of reveal somebody's secrets, if not at least a prophet." Verse 20, "Our fathers worshipped on this mountain." But interesting that she changed the subject a little bit. She realized that Jesus was special, but she didn't follow the conversation. She diverted the conversation to something else. So in verse 20, she says, "Our fathers worshipped on this mountain, but you, Jesus, you Jews, claim that the place where we must worship is in Jerusalem." Again, she was talking about, place of worship, but Jesus said, "Believe me, woman, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem." He was again saying that, hey, it's not really about where you worship. You Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know, for salvation is from the Jews. Now, very subtly, he was pointing out to her that, you worship idols. Now, salvation is of the Jews because they worship God. Important for you to think about it. Yet, a time is coming, and now has come, when the true worshippers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. For they are the kind of worshippers the Father seeks. God is spirit, and his worshippers must worship in spirit and in truth. The woman said, I know that Messiah is coming. Again, Samaritans also believed in the Messiah. They were just a little bit confused with so many other gods. When he comes, he will explain everything to us. But up until that point, she didn't really understand that Jesus was actually the Messiah. Then Jesus declared, I who speak to you am he. Now, her reaction was just outstanding. The disciples came back. They had just gone out to sort of get a bit of food for Jesus. So they came back. But as they were there, as they arrived there, the woman then just left. She didn't even give Jesus any water. She just left and went to town to sort of share what she had just experienced with other people. In verse 29, she says to others, come, see a man who told me everything I've ever done. Could this be Christ? They came out of the town and made their way towards him. Now, the moment that she tasted of the living water, the moment that Jesus actually revealed herself to her, she couldn't resist. She had to go out there and she had to tell people of what she had just tasted. She understood there of what it is to taste of the living water. The Samaritan woman represents the working of practical faith in Christ. Every true follower of Christ is born into the kingdom of God as a disciple. He who drinks the living water becomes a fountain of life, an active disciple like the Samaritan woman. Many of us try to quench our thirst at the fountains of this world with worldly things, only to be thirsty again. We all long for something to fill the wants of our hearts, but only one can meet the needs of our heart, what is really important, and that is Jesus Christ. He alone is the source of the purifying, refreshing, invigorating water. The living water is at our disposal today. We just need to drink it, to keep drinking it, so that our hearts can be cleansed. It is very important for us to look after the physical needs of the least of these, here in New Zealand and also abroad, to engage in social justice issues and make a difference in our society. And for that, I invite you to join hands with Adra. But it is also extremely important that we do it lovingly, not mechanically. For what we need to be, but for that, we need to be filled with the living water. Because in so doing, we will naturally bring the love of Christ to others around us. Now, the Samaritan woman understood what it is to taste of the living water. The living water is there for us. Jesus is always available for us, no matter what we have done. Samaritan woman, yes, had her sins like we all do. But once Jesus revealed himself to her, she took it. Would you take it today? Would you drink of that living water today? The choice is ours. Lord, thank you for being so good to us. Thank you for always being there for us. Lord, we don't want to taste of the living water just on Saturdays when we come to church. We want to taste it. We want to drink it every day of our lives so that our hearts can be changed. Lord, we really want to be changed so that we can experience what it is to really work for you. We can experience what it is to be your servants. There's so many people out there, Lord, that are thirsty. They don't know about you. So, Lord, be with each one of us. May our hearts really be cleansed with the living water. That's my prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.